Good evening, everybody. Great to see you. I did not confirm today's class until very late. Sorry about that. That was just something had come up. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it, but thank God we can in the end. And tonight's topic is a great topic, an important topic, and actually a timely topic. And as usual, we're going to start with a joke because jokes are a way to get started. And today's joke is, you're forewarned, is not even remotely funny. And it goes like this, but it is connected to what I'm going to talk about. And it goes like this: the jungle was filled with diverse but selfish animals. It is a vibrant ecosystem. Ha 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 ha. Okay, why is that important? Because we're actually going to get into that discussion today about jungle being an ecosystem. And what do I mean by that? So let's give you a little bit of history. The history is like this. In 1950, the sixth Chabad Rebbe was getting ready to commemorate the yahrzeit, the passing of his grandmother, and the yahrzeit of his mother. And so he wrote a Hasidic discourse, which he was going to give out for their yahrzeits. What ended up happening was he actually passed away on his grandmother's yahrzeit, and he never got to say it, but it was printed. And so he wrote this Hasidic discourse, and this Hasidic discourse became the basis of which the Rebbe said, so to speak, the seventh Chabad Rebbe said, this is, so to speak, the last will and testament. This is his message, his final message and final mission. And it's a very fascinating Hasidic discourse. It has 20 chapters. So it's very, very long, and it's really, really beautiful and very deep at the same time. However, it starts off with one very famous part, and that very famous part really, that very famous part really sets the stage for everything else that the Rebbe planned on saying in his in the many, many years. And this is all about, like I said, is the world a garden? Is the world a is the world a garden, or is the world a jungle? And what do we mean by that? We mean, what's the difference between a garden and a jungle? Anybody wants to pipe in over here? You're free to pipe in.
A garden is usually man-made.
Right.
And it's tame,
Right. A garden is usually man-made, and it's usually tame. Exactly. It's usually nice, usually something people appreciate, whereas a jungle is wild. As I said, it's a giant ecosystem. Everybody's ego runs wild. And in fact, if you're fast enough in the jungle, you might even be a cheetah. Okay, sorry about that one. Couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. Sorry. As long as you're not a crocodile. Okay. All right. I should stop while I'm ahead, right? Yeah. So that's what goes on in the jungle. The jungle is what people sometimes look at this world as. It's a jungle. It's a place where, if you're fast enough, if you're smart enough, if you're wise enough, dog eat dog world, what they call. And nothing more really brings that out than, unfortunately, the events of this last week. We had the unfortunate hostage situation in a synagogue in Texas, and we all followed that closely, of course, after Shabbos. And it makes you wonder, is this world, a jungle? How safe is this world? A world in which, people can storm a synagogue on the holiday, during the services. It makes us question, is God really running this world? Is this world a jungle? Is it a garden? What is the story behind this world? And again, so when these events happen, they make us wonder. And that was kind of the official topic of the class. As I said, how do we look at this upside down world? The world kind of seems a little bit upside down. How do we view this upside down world and see the beauty in it when it seems so wild? It seems like a jungle. So let's take a look over here. As I said, this is based on, Dan, it's nice to see you change your name. We said it's based on a Hasidic discourse of the previous Rebbe, what we're going to discuss today. It's also connected to this week's Torah portion, as we'll see. So let's take a look over here. This is the quote. And let me just pull this out over here. Okay, this is the quote over here. And the quote, one second. Oh, I know what I have to do. Okay, this is the quote that that is in the beginning of the discourse, and it's called Basi Lagani. It's called Basi Lagani. What does Basi Lagani mean? I have come to my garden. So let's read. I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride, and that is from the Song of Songs. So do people here know what the Song of Songs is? Do you have an understanding of what it is?
Solomon, he wrote it.
Okay. And what is it like? What's its discussions about?
A lot of different topics. I mean, isn't it pretty much kind of a love letter to God? I mean,
Very good. Yes. It's a very, very extreme love letter. If you read the Song of Songs, it's this lengthy love letter in which there's, sometimes it's a bride or whatever, all different types of love. It's a lengthy love letter. In fact, it's so lovely that the sages debated if it should even be part of the Tanakh, the books of the Bible, because it seems too coarse, but they ultimately decided that it should be. It's very, very holy. It's describing the love of us between God. And really, when you think about it, the love of a spouse is many times used as an example as our love to God. In fact, many of the customs of weddings and marriage come from our love to God, more specifically the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai. For example, the chuppah. Where is the origination of the chuppah? It says that before the giving of the Torah, God held the mountain over our heads. He held Mount Sinai. He picked it up and held it over our heads. And God said, either you accept my Torah or I'll bury you here. So that is where we learn that marriage is all about coercion. No, I'm kidding. That's where we learn that in a marriage, you need to have a chuppah, right? So anyways, we learn the love of spouses from God and vice versa. And so in his book of Song of Songs, God says, referring to the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai, he says, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. And that refers to the Song of Songs. Now, it's interesting. God says, at the giving of the Torah, God finally descends on Mount Sinai and sees the people. And he says, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride, which implies that it's a beautiful place. And as the Rabbi points out, not only is it a beautiful place, but God says it's my garden. Okay, look, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride. The Midrash notes it doesn't say garden, rather it says my garden. In other words, to my home, to my abode, to the place where I once resided, for in the beginning, God's essence was found in this world. In other words, you would think that God resides in heaven. That's where he really lives. That's his beautiful place. And then he comes and visits us in this lowly world. It's like a king who might come to visit your home, your chaotic home. It's not his kingdom. It's not his palace, but he comes for a visit to visit you. So we might think that God lives in heaven and he comes to visit us on this earth and give us some nice goodies, so to speak. But the Medrash says just the opposite. No, God's real place is down here in this earth. He's not real places down here in this earth. He's not here right now because maybe he's not so welcome, but really this is God's home and God's garden. We just may not see it. So again, God is not showing up to a garden. God is showing up to my garden. And this is, when you think about a revolutionary idea, again, do we look at the world as naturally God's place, or do we look at it as a place that God has to stretch himself to come to? So let's take a look here. The Rebbe fleshes this out for us. He says like this: when you look around at the materialism and the coarseness of the physical world which surrounds you, you might become anxious and afraid. What is happening to the world? Things seem to deteriorate from generation to generation and from year to year. I'm sure many of you have those feelings. Goodness and holiness don't seem to be gaining the upper hand. The opposite seems to be the case. This is especially true regarding the state of the Jewish people, who are always the smallest amongst the nations. The situation doesn't seem to be getting better. From a rational perspective, we can make the mistake of seeing the world as a jungle where wild beasts rule the landscape. It doesn't seem to be an orchard, a positive place which produces delicious fruit for human consumption. You could easily become discouraged and indifferent. What hope is there to make a difference, you'll think, when the situation seems to get worse from generation to generation and from year to year? And this is not this is not just the Rebbe projecting on us what we would think. You just have to look at op-eds in any newspaper to find that those opinions. I know it's not just the journalistic articles, but the op-eds and everything seem to paint a picture in which, unless we do X, Y, and Z, this world is, going to HELL. Everything's getting worse. Nothing's getting better. And we're just destroying this earth and everything else. And in that type of worldview, the previous Rebbe brings this midrash and says, no, we have to make sure we look at the world as a garden. And the Rebbe points out that who gave us this message? Who gave over this message telling us the world is a garden? If Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett gives us a message, the world is a garden, it's a beautiful place. We're like, okay, it's beautiful for you. You have all the money in the world. You can do whatever you want. Life is great. The message doesn't resonate as powerful. So the Rebbe pointed out that who is the one that really gave us this message? Yes, it's written in a Medrash, but the previous Rebbe gave us this message, and he was not somebody that lived a garden life. Okay, he didn't live a privileged life. He had a very difficult life. For one, he was Jewish, but he was Jewish. He went through a lot of big difficulties in his life. So let's read, pointing this out. Very, very interesting when you think about it that way. The message of the previous Rebbe in his discourse addresses this very point. The previous Rebbe himself underwent the most difficult situations. He experienced all four categories of suffering for which a person must thank God upon survival. For those who don't know, there are four reasons you have to thank God. One is if you go to jail. He went to jail for spreading Judaism. One is if you got very sick and got healed. He got very, very sick. He actually had multiple sclerosis for a big part of the later part of his life, and somehow managed to live somewhat of a full life without it. Then the other one is if you cross a sea, especially back in the day, it was dangerous. He crossed over the Atlantic when the U-boats were out there, so that was a very special thing. And what's the fourth? Oh, crossing a desert. I'm not sure exactly if he crossed the desert. I guess he did cross the desert somewhere in his travels. And he says, even when he finally arrived in a safe haven, which is when he came to America in 1940, where he was no longer under threat, he suffered both spiritually and physically. Physically, he was, didn't have a lot of money in America. People don't realize how tiny Chabad was when it came to America. In fact, most Hasidic groups when they came to America were tiny, but it was really, really very small. And spiritually, when he came to America, some of his greatest admirers told him, give up. This is not like the old country, just live out your life, enjoy being a Hasidic Rebbe, and, it's going to be over. There is no need to dwell on it at length. Nonetheless, he taught this most amazing teaching in the days and years which followed. I have come to my garden. The world which he lived in, despite its external appearances, was a garden, not a field which produces sustenance, but a field which produces fruit. It's not just anyone's garden. It isn't owned by someone who is not particular of its quality. It's a garden of which God says that it is my garden. It is God's garden and orchard, and it is not only his temporary possession, it is his home, the place where his deepest essence is most comfortable. So what we're saying here is that this garden that we're talking about was the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe was saying this world is God's garden. This world that was very difficult to him. For those who don't know, he was actually saved by the Nazis. Very interestingly, he was the Nazis at that point of the war wanted to do a favor to America, so they saved him, to get in America's good graces. They wanted to say, "Oh, we're saving a big Hasidic Rebbe." They wanted to get into America's good graces. He was actually saved by some Nazis. There's an interesting movie about it. One day I should show it. It's a very interesting story how he was saved by Nazis. But regardless, he had a very difficult life. Yet, nevertheless, he said this world is God's garden. And when you think about it, was he just oblivious to the world? Did he not live in reality? I'm sure you've met many people who had a lot of difficulties in their life, and they look like the happiest people. And then you wonder, what is it? What is it about them? What is it about their life? How is it that they are able to enjoy life? How is it that they're able to look at this world and yet see beyond it? I know personally, and maybe some of you experience this, that just when I have a bad day, it's enough to say, oh my gosh, everything's terrible. Many of us, you have a bad day, it's like, okay, all right, I'll go to sleep tomorrow, it'll be better, right? Many of us has difficulty dealing with a bad day. Here, the previous Rebbe dealt with a bad life for the most part, and yet nevertheless, he saw the world in a good light. So what is up with that? How did he do it? And the answer is, the first answer is perspective. It starts with perspective. And so first we have to understand that Torah is the truth. And what do I mean by that? Obviously, if we believe that whatever the Torah says is true. There's a very famous line. We say Moshe emes, Moses is true, but Torah so emes, and the Torah is true. Anything that's written in the Torah is true. We don't always understand everything that's written in the Torah, but whatever is written there is true. It says that the sea split. We believe the sea split. Do we understand exactly how? Am I there? It doesn't make a difference. It's the truth. And so we believe anything that's written in the Torah is the truth. And therefore, if the Torah will tell us that this world is a garden, that itself already starts us on the path of seeing things differently. Because once we know that that's the truth, that is the first step to seeing things differently. In other words, if I come to you with philosophy telling you that the world is really a garden of God, you can say maybe yes, maybe no. It's debatable. It's philosophy. We can philosophize about it and what's the more rational approach and which one makes more sense. As long as we're in the field of our understanding, there is no necessary truth. Assuming for a moment you accept the Torah as truth, which I'm making that assumption, of course, because that's what I teach. But assuming you take the Torah at face value and what the Torah says is truth, then when the Torah tells us that the world is God's garden, it's not anymore for debate. Now we just have to figure out, how can I see the fact that the world is God's garden, even if I don't see it? But I know that that's the truth, right? So again, let's take a look over here. But I'm just trying to bring out how it's an empowering idea to know that Torah is truth. Because as long as you don't fully believe that it is or it's not, then you're not even necessarily going to start working on living that truth, because it's still up for debate. But once you decide that that is the truth, that's an empowering thought. So let's take a look over here. Regardless of whether or not you understand it, you can connect with this truth, knowing that it is stated in the Torah of truth, as transmitted in his teachings right before his passing, and it gives you the ability to look at the world with a different perspective. With this newfound attitude, you will notice things that you wouldn't have noticed at first glance when you were looking superficially. Now you will know what to look for, and you will look in that direction. You will look to uncover that which is hiding under the external shell, the fruits of the garden. When you search with this attitude, you can first of all be assured that you will find what you are looking for, being that the Torah truth declares that it is so. Secondly, in your confidence that you will find precious treasures, fruits to which God attests that they are from his garden and abode, you won't be afraid of hard work, and difficulties won't cause you to be sidetracked by other affairs, because you know that a precious treasure awaits you, the opportunity to reveal how this world is God's garden. The opportunity to reveal God's essence is in this world. So he's saying there's 2 points of knowing that the world is a garden of God and a great place. He says, first of all, is that you will find what you're looking for, because you know it's the truth. You'll find the fact that the world is a garden. Number 2, you won't be afraid of the hard work to reveal the fact that the world is a garden. So when you go out into the world and you ask what's going on, and you hear only bad news, which is unfortunately what we hear most of the time, don't be discouraged. Don't question your ability to fulfill your mission. Remember that this reality exists only amongst those who look at the world with the eyes of flesh and blood. But those who follow the verse, raise your eyes to the heaven and see who creates these. They first look up to the heavens and recognize the world is God's garden and orchard, God's abode. Then, if that's how you look at the world, then your perspective changes. So again, what are we getting to? We're getting to knowing the truth can empower you to have a change of perspective, and having a change of perspective can empower you to do the work to see the truth. So again, knowing the truth empowers you to have a change of perspective, and perspective allows you to do the hard work. Let me give an example. Imagine you are carrying a big bag. Your employer tells you to carry a big bag, and whatever is in this big bag you get to keep. And you start trudging along, and you're going up the hill, and it gets very, very heavy. And you're getting sick of it. And at some point you start to question, is it worth all the hard work working for my employer, carrying all these rocks? Then at some point, somebody tells you, whether the employer or somebody else tells you, well, you should know that that's not a thing of rocks. That's actually what do you call it? It's not a thing of rocks. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my thing here. That's not a thing of rocks. It's actually a thing of diamonds. Suddenly, your perspective of this changes. because now you know that you are not just carrying a load of rocks, you're carrying a bunch of diamonds. So what does this change? It changes, first of all, how you look at what you're doing. You don't suddenly feel like you're wasting your time. You're doing something important. And number two, it empowers you to continue the work. Knowing that you're carrying a bunch of diamonds empowers you to continue along in this work. You know, there's we have this in life all the time. When we're doing something that we feel is worthwhile, even if it's difficult, we don't get as tired out as if we're doing something that we don't feel is worthwhile. You know, let's say you manage an office and you're plunging a toilet. I don't know, beneath your dignity or whatever it is. Not what you should be doing, not in line with your mission. When we do those types of things, they really tire us out. Whereas, let's say you're going hiking, which is 10 times harder, but you're enjoying the hike, you're enjoying the fresh air, you're enjoying the exercise. You're much more willing to do that work. And so the same thing is over here. Is a lot of what gets to us is not just seeing the world as a garden, but the work involved in it. If you want let's say you want a beautiful marriage, a beautiful relationship with your kids, which is a garden in your own little life, that requires hard work. If you don't believe that it's a possibility that's the case, you may not put in the hard work. So we always have to understand that this world is a garden and really everything is good. Hopefully we'll get to see it, but we're definitely empowered to work towards getting there, because we know it is the truth. When Mashiach comes, we'll definitely see it all. So the first thing we have today, the first lesson we have today, when we speak about is the world a jungle or a garden, is to change our perspective, to understand and believe that this world is a garden. When we understand and believe that the world is a garden, it will change our perspective of the world around us, and we will eventually find the truth. Any questions or comments? If you're on Facebook or if you're on Facebook, you'll be 30 seconds delayed. If you're on Zoom, any questions you can put in the chat if you want, whichever way. If not, we'll move on to, we'll continue along in the class. Okay. So as I always say, either everything was very clear that you have no questions, or was so unclear that you have no questions either. So whichever way it is, I'll take it. Okay. So we'll move on to the next part. And how is this discussion today connected to our Torah portion? And the answer is it's connected with Jethro, a little bit at least. For those who don't know, this week's Torah portion is the Torah portion in which we have the Ten Commandments, God giving the Torah on Mount Sinai. But before the Torah is given at Mount Sinai, we are told about a certain character who showed up to the Jewish people. Who was that character? His name was Jethro or Yisro, and he is the father-in-law of Moses. So if we remember, Moses grew up in Egypt. At a certain point, he killed an Egyptian, so Pharaoh wanted to kill him. So he had to run away to a place called Midian. When he got to Midian, he married the daughter of a man called Jethro, Yisro. So Jethro or Yisro, his father-in-law, was not part of the Jewish nation. So he had no reason to be with the Jews in Egypt. Okay, so when Moses went back to Egypt, his father-in-law was left behind. So Moses is now leading the Jewish people, and he leaves Egypt. He's in the desert with the Jewish people. They're going to get the Torah very soon. And his father-in-law shows up. Reminds me of the joke. Well, I'll make it personal, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I'm standing in my house, and I hear the doorbell ring, and I come to the door, and there's my mother-in-law standing right there. I said, wow, so nice. What brings you to town? She says, oh, I just, wanted to pop by for a visit. I flew in from New York, came to say hello. So I said, oh, very nice. How long do you plan on staying for? She says, oh, I'll stay as long as you want me to. I say, really? You're not even going to stay for a cup of coffee? Okay, it's a joke because I do get along with my mother-in-law. But so Moses, his father-in-law, comes and shows up in the desert to the Jewish people. And in fact, when he gets there, he starts to give his advice as a good father-in-law. He starts to tell Moses what he thinks he should be doing and shouldn't be doing. Anyways, so the people want to know what made the in our Torah portion, this guy Jethro, the father-in-law, suddenly shows up, and the Torah says something very curious. It says very, very curious line. It says like this: Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midian, and Yisro, the prince of Midian, heard Eis Kol Asher Asa Lakim LeMoshe, everything that God had done for Moshe, Uli Yisrael Amo, and for the Jewish people, Ki Yotzi Hashem es Yisrael Mitzrayim, that God, the Lord, had taken Israel out of the land of Egypt. So the curious line over here is it says Moses' father-in-law heard all that God, and it says he heard and therefore he came. So that implies there's some piece of news that he heard, and which is why he came. And this is in fact what the Talmud asks. By Ma Shmua Shama Uva B'Nisgayer. What did he hear that made him come and convert? In other words, what piece of news? What news about the Jewish people did he hear that caused him to come? If the Torah says he heard something, therefore he came, what is it that he heard that made him decide to come? Now, with Jethro, you could say the answer is very easy. Now, there's obviously lots of debates because rabbis love to debate, and so there is a debate exactly what it is that he heard. But let's take this more practical in our days. If you know anybody who converts, your first question is like, why did you want to convert? We're kind of one of the most hated people. I think the most hate, more hate crimes are done to Jews in America than any other ethnic group. Why would somebody want to convert? What makes somebody decide, oh yeah, the Judaism, that's great, let me decide to convert. It's really what I want to do. Whenever you meet a convert, that's like kind of one of your questions. Like what's going on? Why would you want to join the most hated people ever? It's kind of like, I don't know, if you're British and you decide to become French, right? Or if you're French, you decide to become British. It doesn't make sense. What's going on over here? I have nothing against the British and the French. I'm just saying they hate each other. So and in fact, for those who know, when it comes to conversion, not only do we wonder why people want to convert, but not only that, it's actually a mitzvah. When somebody wants to try and convert, we're supposed to try to dissuade them, tell them it's a bad idea. Let's read over here. This is from the Talmud. The sages taught in a brisa with regard to a potential convert who comes to court in order to convert at the present time when the Jews are in exile. The Jewish court says to him, what did you see that motivated you to come to convert? Don't you know that the Jewish people at the present time are anguished, suppressed, despised, harassed, and hardships are frequently visited upon them? So somebody wants to convert. We don't say, finally, we need a couple more Jews. We say, no, what's wrong with you? This is not a great idea. This is a bad idea. Very, very bad idea. You definitely don't want to try it, right? So that's what we tell them when they first decide to convert. What's interesting is that a basic tenet of somebody deciding to become Jewish is knowing that your conversion will make you a hated and despised person. And if you decide to convert, you should know that's who you're going to be. There's reminds me of there was a couple of Jews. I've said this one before many times, of course. All these jokes are old, they're recycled. Anyways, I'm a very eco-friendly. I recycle my jokes. So there was once this, there were a couple of Jews going around and they didn't have a lot of money. They needed money back in the days, back in the shtetl, they needed money. They heard in a certain church, they were paying you $100 to convert. So one of these Jews, this group of Jews, they come and they don't know if it's true. So they tell one of the guys, they tell Sam, Shmuel, you go in, you test it out, you see what happens and report back to us. So Sam goes into the church, he gets converted, comes out an hour later. So they say, "Nu, did you convert?" He said, "Yes." He says, "So is it true that they give you the $100?" He looks at them and says, "Oh, you Jews, all you think is about money." Anyway, so that's the joke they say. Obviously, so people have all these opinions about Jews where we're money hungry and we're this and we're that. And, I think there was this depiction in France a couple of years ago, or I don't know where it was, Jews holding bags of money, whatever, either way. So one of the basic things you're supposed to tell somebody who wants to convert is they should know that it's not going to be fun. Yet, nevertheless, we are told, as we said a moment ago, that this world is a garden. So which one is it? Are we lying to the convert? Are we telling a fib because we just want to get them off our back? When we tell a convert we're persecuted people, Or do we believe this world is a garden? Which one is true? Again, do we believe this world is truly a garden? Do we truly believe this world is a beautiful place? And if it's a garden, one would expect it's a beautiful place to be a Jew. Or do we see this world as a place where we are defined as persecuted and suffering people? So again, you could answer, we're fibbing, we're lying to the convert, but that would be hard to say. Judaism is very against lying, in case you don't know. It's one of the commandments, midvar sheker tirchak, stay away from lying. We're commanded not to lie, The only time you're allowed to lie is for the sake of peace. Okay, the only time you're allowed to lie. In other words, you can bend the truth a little bit, for the sake of peace. So it says, for example, Aaron, the high priest, he was great at making peace between people. He would walk over to the, two guys were fighting. He would walk over and teach them, say, really, the other guy regrets the fight and he wants to make peace with you, even though none of them said it, but he told both of them. So then they each come and they meet up and they make peace. So you can stretch the truth maybe for the sake of peace. But that's about it, So why would we lie? We can't say we're lying. And the truth is, it is the truth. If you become Jewish, you are persecuted. And it seems like we recognize it. So how can we say this world is a garden, yet we're so persecuted? So in other words, earlier we were saying in the beginning of the class, we were saying, yeah, the truth is this world is a garden. If you recognize this garden, you'll find out that it's a garden. But how do we actually reconcile our belief that this world is a garden with the facts on the ground? And in order to understand that, let's take a look at Maimonides. So let's take a look at Maimonides and what he says in the Guide to Perplexed. For those that don't know, Maimonides wrote a book called The Guide to the Perplexed. And in this book of Guide to Perplexed, he goes through many, many questions of faith. So let's hear what he writes there. Maimonides dedicates several chapters in the Guide to the Perplexed to tell us how we should perceive the world. Should we view it as a place where evil forces dominate and conclude that it is quite far from being a garden or an orchard? Or should we view it positively as an orchard of God himself, and that despite the fact that God has many worlds to choose from, he chooses this mundane and physical world to be his home? His conclusion is that a Jew who follows the dictates of the Torah must view the world in a positive light, with hope and with confidence about the future, as he explains there at length. But, and here's the but, in his correspondence, and others in Maimonides' correspondence, that's in his book of Guide to the Perplexed, there is a letter in which he describes the story of his life and his daily schedule. It is evident that he suffered immensely. Even when he reached the peak of his greatness, when he served in the Sultan's court, he suffered quite literally. He was physically weak and overwhelmed with the responsibilities, right? Many people think, oh, it was so great. He was a doctor to the Sultan, to the king. It's not a great thing, because working for the Sultan is a free job. It's not like, today where you work, on the government pay and benefits. I know it's a big topic now, right? How much the doctors get paid by the government. But regardless, back then you'd work for a king or a sultan, you wouldn't get any money. Throughout most of the day, he was occupied with matters which were very distant from matters in which he found his true passion and pleasure, intellectual pursuits. In his own writings, and especially in the Guide to the Perplexed, he extols the virtues of his intellectual engagement, describing it as the pinnacle of human accomplishment. It is quite evident that this is where he found his greatest joy and pleasure. So what we're trying to say is that Maimonides himself, in his Guide to the Perplexed, writes how beautiful this world is. He has a discussion: is the world evil? Is it an orchard? Is it a jungle? He describes how it's so beautiful. Yet in his personal letters, he's writing how difficult his life is. Just to give you a little bit of background, he grew up in Cordoba, and he had to leave there because of the Almohads, I believe. And then he went to Morocco, and then he tried going to Israel, and there he was almost murdered until he eventually made it to Egypt. Even when he was in Egypt, which he didn't really want to be in, he would rather be in Israel. He went to Egypt because that was the safest place. And again, don't forget, Jews were not supposed to live in Egypt. He had a brother who supplied him with all his money so he could dedicate his life to scholarship. Then at one point, his brother tragically died on a business trip, and he was left supporting himself. And when he supported himself, he became a doctor. And when he was a doctor, he worked most of the days for the Sultan. And, it was a very, very difficult life. And it was a great stress. And just to give you an example, he writes like this: I returned to Egypt from the palace in the afternoon. So he writes, early in the morning, I get up, I pray, I eat, I go to the palace. And then he says, I return from the palace in the afternoon. I'm starving, but the corridors are filled with Jews and non-Jews, important and unimportant people, judges and leaders, a great multitude of people all waiting to see me, and the visits continue sometimes into the night. I speak to the patient lying on my back from great fatigue. Night comes and I'm totally exhausted, too tired to speak. So this is the great Maimonides. He spends all his time just drained. That's what it sounds like. He has a very drained life. Yet this same man is writing how beautiful this world is. And again, like I said, it's easy if you were Jeff Bezos or you're any of these rich people, Tesla, whatever his name is, Elon Musk. It's nice to say the world is a garden, but how, it's very easy also, people who have a good life can all preach about why bad things happen to good people. And there's a lot of people from their high horse can say a lot of things. We see this a lot. People from their high horse say a lot of things. Then when it happens to them, they're suddenly not so, everything that they said, whoosh, out the window, right? So, but here's people who actually live this. Maimonides lived this life. He lived the difficulties. How do we actually find joy? How do we actually find beauty? How do we actually find pleasure in the difficult grind of a day-to-day life that definitely Maimonides experienced, and we experienced hopefully in a lesser manner, but we still experienced to an extent. So he says like this: this life of a Jewish leader and a guide for the perplexed is a reflection of life of the entire Jewish people. The Torah of Truth testifies that the Jewish people in our day, before the coming of the redemption, are persecuted and harassed. Indeed, this is even a fundamental tenet of Judaism, which must be internalized by every convert. Nonetheless, the Jewish people are commanded to serve God with joy. And since this demand for joy comes from the Torah, and it is a commandment, not only a suggestion, we must conclude that we have what to be joyous about. The Torah does not make unrealistic demands, being as mentioned, the Torah of truth, being that it's a Torah of truth. So how do we find joy? It says like this: the answer can be derived from the opening words of the discourse, I have come to my garden. These words tell us that before we enter the world, God enters first. He establishes the world as his dwelling place, the place where his essence resides. Being that we find ourselves with God in the same home, the fact that we are persecuted or harassed becomes entirely irrelevant. So again, he's saying, being that we find ourselves with God in the same home, the fact that we are persecuted or harassed becomes entirely irrelevant. This is a mind shift change, which we're going to discuss soon. I'm going to expound upon this, but it's an interesting thought. During a moment of immense pleasure, a person does not notice the bite of a fly. It is not that the bite doesn't exist. It's just that he doesn't feel it because he's overwhelmed with the immense experience of being together with God under one roof. In other words, let's say you take upon yourself, for argument's sake, being with God as a pleasurable experience. If you are in the midst of something very wonderful and you get bit by a fly or a mosquito, it doesn't bother you so much, because the experience is so wonderful and amazing. If you're in a very bad experience and you get bit by a mosquito, it just adds on. And I was there, and this happened, that happened, and I got bit by a mosquito. It's like, what's his name? Murphy's really following me around, right? But if you're experiencing a good experience, as one of my teachers once put it, imagine you won the lottery. You're on the way driving to Tallahassee. You get off at a rest stop and you stub your toe. Not a big deal. So you stubbed your toe. It's not going to bother you that much. Just one second. It's not gonna bother you so much because, okay, so I stubbed my toe, but I'm doing okay. So that's what he's saying over here. When we speak with a non-Jew before a potential conversion, he cannot yet perceive this feeling. In other words, it's such a powerful idea. In other words, if they're not Jewish yet, then they may not yet appreciate the beauty of being Jewish despite the difficulties. That's what we're trying to say. In other words, we're not lying to the person who's not yet Jewish, to the potential convertee. We're telling them the truth. It's very difficult. Yet we as Jews do not live day to day dwelling on the difficulty of being Jewish, because it's so beautiful being Jewish that along with all the baggage that it comes with, we're so happy to be Jewish. And this is something that so many people don't understand. Therefore, we mustn't deceive him. He must be told that from a materialistic perspective, the Jewish people are persecuted and harassed. But this is only because he can't yet appreciate the power of God's presence. It's like telling a businessman worth millions of... So let me just pause here before I get to the next point over there. I find that idea so powerful in that when you really are living a Jewish life, then it doesn't take away any of the persecutions. It's almost like we've come to accept it, that this is, I don't want to say accept because that's a bad word. We shouldn't accept these bad things happening. We have to prevent them. But we do understand living as a Jew may make us a target. Living as a Jew may create more difficulties for us than blending with the crowd. But it's so beautiful that we would never change it for anything else in the world. It's such a wonderful thing, living such a meaningful and powerful life. And I really think that's what, when people look at the survival of the Jewish people and wonder, how is it? This is the only answer. How did the Jews survive all these years of persecution? Why did they stay Jewish? For what reason? Because to a Jew, if you're not going to be Jewish, then it's not worth living, so to speak. In other words, living your life as a Jew is your meaning and purpose. It's such a beautiful life. And you almost look at like, well, yeah, I can live the life without my Jewishness, but then what am I alive for? And so it's not like it's like with the old joke. It goes, there's a Jew. He passes away. He comes to heaven. He comes to God's throne and he asks God, is it true that we are the chosen people? And God says yes. And he says, God, maybe you can choose somebody else next time. All right, that's the joke, but that's the truth. Being Jewish and the beauty of a Jewish life is something that we would never switch out for anything. And so the Jews in the shtetl, some became resentful. I'm not going to take it away, but those who really appreciated the life that they were living, they would never switch it out for anything. They could be poor, they could be downtrodden, they could be barred from so many businesses. But they would all say, Ashreinu matov chalkeinu, how lucky is our lot that we get to live this wonderful and beautiful life, this wonderful life of meaning. Jonathan Sachs has a nice video out there about what it means, why I'm a Jew. I think it's called Why I'm Jewish or something. What it means to be a Jew, what being Jewish means to me. It's a nice 6-minute video if you want to go look up the sketch. It's pretty cool. So back to our topic over here. What makes our life so beautiful is that we are in God's presence. Just to express that a little bit more, I'm going to show you a quick cartoon because it's always a great way of showing everything. And let me know if because we always have trouble. And I did figure out, I'm not using my regular computer. So 1 second, how come I can't see everybody? Oh, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see this picture on this video? Or yeah, you can. Okay. All right, good. All right. So maybe I did fix it. If you don't see anything, let me know. I don't hear anything personally. Do you hear it? Okay, good.
Why are you always so happy?
You don't think it's a good idea to be happy?
It's wonderful to be happy, but what are you happy about?
I'm happy because I'm celebrating.
What are you celebrating?
I'm celebrating that I'm not alone.
You're not alone. I'm here.
Well, yes, I'm celebrating that too. But even when you're not here, I'm still not alone.
Because Fievel is here?
Because the infinite creator of the universe is here.
But he's always here.
That's just the point.
So what's to celebrate?
Okay, Mary. Think of someone you love, respect, and admire. Someone who makes you feel very small and very big at the same time.
Okay, I'm thinking.
Now imagine you're all alone in your room and you hear a knock on the door. And when you open the door, guess who's standing there?
Zadie!
And we celebrate, right?
Right.
Now think of the infinite creator of the universe, sole developer of nuclear fission, photosynthesis, human consciousness, and the space-time continuum. But of all the things he has made, he's decided to take a special interest in little you. and now he's standing at your door, waiting to come in and celebrate.
Celebrate what?
Celebrate this amazing world he's made. Celebrate that the two of you are together. Celebrate celebrating.
So why doesn't he just come in and celebrate?
Because he's waiting for you to invite him in. And all you have to do to invite him in is to start celebrating already.
Okay, Zadie, let's party!
So it's actually very interesting. This brings out the point that we were just saying, and I couldn't hear it, so it was quite interesting also watching the video while not being able to, I did watch it before, of course. But that video really depicts all what we're saying over here, is that knowing that you are experiencing life together with this wonderful person that loves you and cares for you adds so much meaning to your life. And the way to tap into that, as he said, is by being joyous. So it's kind of an interesting thing. The way to tap into joy, it's almost like saying the way to tap into joy is by being joyous. The way to let God into our lives is by being happy. It says that God does not like to hang out in sad places. It's not his favorite place. He likes to hang out in joyous places. That's Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy. And so when we appreciate that truly this world is a garden and we are happy with the life that we have, that allows us to feel more of God in our life. So let's take a look over here at another meditation, so to speak, a way of looking at the joy of life, despite the sometimes difficulties. So again, our theme over here has been, although the world is difficult, but our life is difficult, it's a life that we would never switch for anything else. And because it's such a wonderful life being with God, and therefore a little bit won't bother you. It's like telling a businessman worth millions of gold coins that he lost a copper penny today. The man will look at you like you're a total fool. What value is there to a single penny when you know that he earned millions of gold coins in one fell swoop? But that's only true of a person who appreciates the value of gold coins. If you can only appreciate the value of a simple copper coin and have never seen a gold coin in your life, you will only know that coin, a worn out copper coin, has been lost. It's like kids, right? If they have a real gold coin and a chocolate gold coin in their hands, and you take away the chocolate gold coin, they are very upset, even though they have something worth much more in their hands, with which they can buy many, many more chocolate coins. So all this hinges on the appreciation of what you have. And that's what I said earlier. The shtetl Jew appreciated the Jewish life so much that the difficulties of life didn't bother him, and he was able to be happy. The fact that Jews are persecuted and harassed is only visible to the non-Jew. It is for someone, when it says non-Jew here, it obviously means someone who doesn't have that appreciation. Of course, you can be non-Jewish and have that appreciation. This was in context of the potential convertee. It is entirely irrelevant to the Jewish people, comparable to the loss of a single copper penny while simultaneously earning millions of gold coins. Why dwell on the minor loss of a penny when we have earned millions of dollars? Why dwell on the material loss of being a Jew, being harassed and persecuted as you stroll in God's garden? In the most simple terms, when a Jew becomes permeated with this idea that the greatest joy is to be with God under the same roof, while everything else is a mere externality, that itself serves as a source for an abundance of blessing in his material matters, with children, good health, and abundant livelihood, allowing him to study Torah and fulfill mitzvot, thereby making this world a home for God amid comfort and peace of mind. And so, if your life focus is on material matters and your life focus is on being able to, the shtetl Jew, if their focus was, I want to be able to go to college, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do that, then yes, you can become resentful for being a Jew. I just read the other day, it's actually a terrible story, but it's interesting, kind of a twist. There was a Jew who moved from Russia to America, and he was one of the few Jews that had a beard, and he moved back to Russia, and he told his friend he was moving back to Russia because in America, people would throw sticks or stones at him for being Jewish. And he says, it's terrible. I want to go back to Russia. So what happened? He moved back to Russia, and not so long after he moved back to Russia, he was one day going on a train and murdered by a bunch of anti-Semites for being Jewish. They found him later. His kids eventually came to America, which is the nice part. But it's just kind of interesting how I think it's kind of the same thing as a Jew in America. We can look at the problems and let's say some of the anti-Semitism that is still here, but why focus on the negative? Obviously, we want to fix the negatives, but focus on the positive, how wonderful it is to be Jewish in America, right? So if that Jew had understood, all right, in America, I get sticks and stones. In Russia, I get my throat slaughtered, where are you going to pick? But that's also the more general way of looking at life is, are we focusing on the negatives only? Or are we focusing on the beauty of my life? Are we focusing on what's really, really special? I'll give a story. There's a lady called Rachel Zamir. Rachel Zamir, she was a teacher and educator for many, many years, and she passed away recently. She wrote a book called Shlichut Chayai, My Life's Mission, and she was an educator. She wrote a book all about education. She tells a story. She was a teacher in Israel, and there were a lot of underprivileged kids in her classes. There were Yemenite kids and Morocco, these Sephardic kids. In the early days in Israel, the Sephardic kids were the Sephardim in general were very much persecuted by the Ashkenazim, unfortunately. So anyways, they were usually given the worst places in Israel to live. For those who know a little bit of the history, it caused a lot of tension in Israel at different times. The divide between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, it really wasn't until Begin was elected that things started to change. In fact, there was a point in Israel where there were the Israeli Black Panthers, which were fighting against Ashkenazim. It's very interesting history. But regardless, so she was a teacher in one of these schools. And over there was a rule that you had to pay tuition. Even though the government gave some money, you had to pay some tuition. And one day, one of the parents walked in and threatened her with a knife and said, "You better take my kid, or I'm going to kill you." And she said, "Well, I don't want to pay any money." And she said, "Well, it's not me, it's the government." But either way, she took the kid and didn't charge the guy any money. Of course, you're not going to go after that guy for money. And later on, she wrote a letter to the Rabbi, and she said, I'm not so interested in doing this teaching anymore. I'm getting threatened, as it is, teaching is a thankless job. For those who know teaching, it's one of the hardest things. It's not a very high paid position. And, you don't see the fruits of your labor so easily because, your students are there when they're students, and, the fruits of your labor only come out 20, 30 years later. Usually people don't call you up and say, "Oh, you were my kindergarten teacher. It was so great. You're my college teacher. I can't believe how much I appreciate it." It doesn't usually happen. So she wrote a letter to the Rebbe saying how much she didn't like it. And the Rebbe wrote like this. The Rebbe said, "It would be worthy to contemplate deeply what is written from the mouths of infants." In other words, there's a saying that it says, from the mouths of infants, that's where the Jewish strength comes from. In other words, when Jewish children learn, that's where our real Jewish strength comes from, because children inherently haven't sinned because they're not bar and bat mitzvah. And to come to the conclusion about the worthiness of their education and the great merit is for those whom divine providence has given the privilege of enjoying the riches. So in other words, what the Rebbe answered her wasn't, "I'm going to take away your problems. I'm going to make your teaching easy. I'm going to take away these threatening parents." And he said, just think about the privilege and the beauty of what you're doing. And it's true. Any teacher that teaches, that's why they're doing it, because the beauty, they love what they're doing and what they're giving to the children, and they realize it as a life's mission. And so the same thing we have to realize in our lives. Maybe being Jewish is difficult sometimes, and maybe this world doesn't always look like a garden, but that is all when we look at it from a very materialistic perspective. But our lives are so rich, so full of meaning. We see so many people today going around searching for meaning, searching for purpose. It's so hard for so many people. People are just bouncing around. People in their 30s are still trying to figure themselves out, right? Like, what's going on? Like, what's going on with our world today? But that's what happens when you have a materialistic society. Yeah, you can do whatever you want, but it's so empty. For those who watch the Orthodox movie, we'll see that. And I'm going to give a cheap plug over here for myself over here. It's going to be one of the topics in our upcoming JLI course about Jewish meditations from Sinai. Meditation is not just about, it's about really focusing on your life. Some people might call it mindfulness. Either way, you want to join our JLI course, which is starting in 2 weeks, Jewish meditation. But regardless, coming back to what we're saying over here, this is really the idea is, do we not know that life is hard? Did Maimonides not know that his life was hard? When we tell the convert life is going to be difficult as a Jew, are we lying? No. If you look at it purely from a material perspective, taking God out of the equation, yes, it looks difficult. Keeping Shabbat, well, Shabbat, part of it is easy, but many of the holidays, many of the mitzvahs, kosher is very expensive. Are all these things easy? They're not easy, but they're so beautiful. It's so much meaning. And so that's really, how do we look at this world as a garden? Is appreciate who we are. Nobody is going to say, oh, look at what happened in Texas, let's give up being Jewish. We're so proud to be Jewish. We're going to protect ourselves, yes. But we wouldn't give up this life for anything, because if we give up this life, what other life is there? That is why so many Jews over the generations were willing to give up their lives for God. They were willing to sacrifice their lives and die and not, be forced to go to something else, to a different religion. Because if you're not living this life, well, what is it worth living for? What is the purpose? And so that's what it means when we say this world is a garden. Recognizing and having the joy of having God in our life. It's a matter of perspective. Life is good. We're not ignoring the facts. It is a good life. It's a good life if you come to that appreciation. If life is all about items and things, then no, of course, I can't lie to you, but that's not what a garden is necessarily about. It's like eating healthy food. Healthy food is not necessarily the most delicious. Cookies are the best, but eat cookies every day and see what happens. I think there was a story of somebody who had a heart attack at a very young age, and it turned out they ate, they were only eating chocolate chip cookies or something. Like, this is going to happen if that's all you eat. So is the world a garden? Yes. How do we get to there? We have to change our perspective. And when we can realize our life's mission and what we're doing, and when we can realize collectively as our mission as the Jewish people and as really people on this earth in general, and everybody lives this truth, then I think naturally the world will be a kinder and nicer place. If everybody understands that this world is a place where God is, we'll treat it as such, and slowly but surely we'll make this world a better place. And so is the world a garden or a jungle? That's entirely dependent on your perspective. And so it's up to you. And so I think the takeaway from this class is to meditate and think, despite the difficulties in your life, do you find your life meaningful and beautiful? And if you do, focus on that, appreciate that, enjoy that, and try and share that joy and beauty with others without ever becoming, taking away from the reality, without ever saying, ignoring the reality, but saying, this is my beautiful Jewish life, and I appreciate it, and I love it, and I'm so proud to live this life every single day. So that's my message for this week. I hope you all gain a good perspective that we're living life with God. It's a garden, and we'll see you next week for next week's class, next Wednesday. I'm not sure what the topic is. If you didn't notice, by the way, I change my topics very often. That's because I'm usually making my weekly email on Thursdays, and by the time it comes to Wednesday, I may have decided to talk about something else. So just in case, the only time I don't change the topic is if it's the JLI course. The JLI course I don't change because it's a course, and so I stick to it. So we will be start a JLI course. I should send out the email very soon, starting in 2 weeks. Meditations from Sinai, a really cool course, and there are some type of credits for different types of people. So I will be putting that all out very soon. So look out for that. Thank you all for coming. We're going to stop the Facebook, and I will stick